tabernacle. We looked at leadership quality. And so now we've been at Mount Sinai for approximately 11 months, 11 months, almost a year. And we're going to find out a little bit more of that. We're getting ready to leave. We got a few things to tie up, so I want you to focus in. But I told you to hold on because if you get bogged down in the detail, you actually miss out on some of the most mind-boggling stories. And we're going to get to see some of the things that God did with the Israelites when they leave Mount Sinai. As we get into our lesson tonight, we're getting into the two silver trumpets. We're continuing with that. Remember on last time we taught about that. We introduced that this was a sign to the people that you could blow them one time, two times, and then they would know what to do. Because most theologians believe it was like 1 million plus people. So there had to be some kind of way of letting them know, okay, it's time to move. Now God, he has the cloud. When the cloud lifts, they know, the children of Israel know that they have to follow him. When that cloud rests or that fire at night, they know, okay, it's time to stop. So God's presence was there, but he did not wait on the people to move. The people waited on God to move. All right, that's key. I believe in our day and time, it's a struggle for all of us that sometimes we move and then we want God to catch up with us. Right? So many of our prayers are like, God, I want this, or God, I already done this. Can you get me out of this? And we put God behind those things that we've already chosen. I want to encourage you to put God first. Remember your homework on last time, 15 minutes of prayer without distractions. If you did not do that, your homework assignment is extended. So 15 minutes without distractions. That meant no phones. That meant no smartwatches. That meant no TVs. That meant no bologna sandwiches or anything like that. 15 minutes where you got on your knees or you sat in your chair without any distractions. And I'm telling you, it will change your life. It really would. First, you feel like you're going to go crazy. But it just, God's presence comes. And you're like, man, I need more of this. I need more of this. And if you did go through 15 minutes and you still didn't get to that piece, guess what? Extend it. It just means you got a lot of baggage. You got a lot of stuff that's going on. And it's going to take some more time with God. He's always there, but so that you can feel his presence. So I encourage you to please do that. As we jump into our section today, Numbers 10, 9 and 10, someone read, please.
When you arrive in your own land and go to war against your enemy who attack you, sound the alarm with the trumpet. Then the Lord your God will remember you and rescue you from your enemies. Blow the trumpets in times of gladness too. Sound them at your annual festivals and at the beginning of each month. And blow the trumpets over your burnt offerings and peace offerings. The trumpet will remind your God of his covenant with you. I am the Lord your God.
What a beautiful picture. These trumpets warned people, but they were also a reminder. I've always wanted here at Ebenezer some trumpets. When I first got here, I wanted me a kind of an ensemble, and some of you y'all got brass instruments in your closets, and they just sit there. You only do your kids have been in these orchestras, and you won't even encourage them to come to church and blow their trumpets. But in my former church that I was in with my dad, we had a trumpeter, and it always blessed me to hear that trumpet blow. It was just a blessing. And here in the Old Testament, these trumpets were a sound that they would remind them of God's glory, God's covering, God's leadership. Look at that commentary. The trumpets were not only for the wilderness march, but were to be used in the land as well. Note the words, in your land. God would fulfill his promise made to Abraham. And that's key, his covenant. What things in your life remind you of God keeping his promises? You got to have those things. There's some major things in my life. You know, I think about my joy that's in Japan now when she broke her femur. And the doctors didn't know how her leg was going to grow. And now I see her, a beautiful young lady, able to go all over the world. I remember another point where God kept his covenant. My wife, when she had brain surgery, and I was like, Doctor's like, we don't know what's going to happen, but now my wife is still functioning. So all of us should have some points in our lives where we go, God has been faithful. God has been faithful. And there are a lot of points. I could just put point after point, not just bad to good, but some great points. When I look back over my life, I'm like, God, you were in that. God, you did that. And so as the trumpets reminded them of God's faithfulness, his covenant, we have to have those hallmarks within our lives that we're reminded of how good God is. That commentary continues on. His descendants would be given a land, but their disobedience and faithlessness would delay their entrance. For how long? 40 years. And I still believe, even now, God is kind. We have accepted Jesus Christ. He's in us. But I believe we can slow down God's progress in our lives. Now, again, God can do whatever he wants to do, but I think we slow down because of our faithlessness. I believe a lot of us could have been so far ahead in our spiritual journey if we would have just allowed God to have his way. I mean, think about the things we did at young, that, we tell our kids, sow your wild oats. I remember, that coming across to me. So I was like, what does that mean? And then when I started raising kids, I'm like, I don't want them to sow their wild oats, right? Because there's a cost for sowing wild oats, right? For some, it takes a long time to pay that price back. And some of you never pay that price back. So you think about all those years or months that you wasted focused on your own self. And this is the children of Israel. They could have literally, most theologians, even though they stay at Mount Sinai 11 months, but even before that, it was disobedience. And that's why God had to correct them. And God is teaching them at Mount Sinai that they could have made it across. And this is conservative, in about 2 weeks. They could have went from Egypt to the promised land, eating big grapes and having good food and living in houses. But instead, because of disobedience and faithlessness in God, they go around and round and round in circle. Anybody in here ever went around and round in circle? Yeah. I mean, I think all of us, you're like, man, I think I've been here before. And we have, because we've got to trust the Lord. Look at this. You ready? We get to depart from Mount Sinai. We've been here. Now, we concised it. We went through all the details that God gave us, and took us about a month and a half to get in that. But the children of Israel, again, about 11 months to a year at Mount Sinai, getting all these details. And I know there had been people like me, God, when are we going to leave? We've been at this mountain a long time, and God keeps speaking, and God keeps speaking, and God, I'm like, let's leave. But they can't leave until God leads them. Let's jump in this, Numbers 10 and 11. Someone read, please. So now we've got, they're used to staying, and then God's cloud lifts up. They're like, okay, this is what we've been taught. We've been getting an understanding. When God moves, we follow. Now, this is a serious orchestration, because we've learned there are certain core heights. They have to break down part of the tabernacle. Everybody has to do their part. They have been training for this all of these months. They've been getting in this mind. When God moves, we've got to be ready to move with him. And this is key in our lives. Get this, please, as we think about our lives. Sometimes God keeps us in a holding zone so that we can be prepared to move. And sometimes it's a long time. Sometimes it's a long time. You don't realize, like, why am I still here? Because God is preparing you to move. I just saw Miss Adrian. I just thought one of the most irritating parts of a flight for me is when you come into an airport that's busy and they put the plane in a circle, a holding pattern. And I can tell, because I'm not like y'all. It's like I've got some family members that can sleep while the plane's going. I don't sleep because I just want to make sure the pilot doing what he's doing. So when we're in that holding pattern, because I'm very sensitive to the movements, every time the pilot banks, I can feel it. And when them wings go down, I'm like, we're going around in circles. They got us in a holding pattern. And sometimes you can be there a long time, but that is good because what they're doing, they're holding that pilot, they're holding that plane there, and so at the proper time, they can come in and make a safe landing. And sometimes it's not because it's so busy. Sometimes it's wind shears. The wind decides to do something crazy, and they're like, no, this is not safe. We're going to keep you going around in circles. In our lives, God does that. God says, we're going to keep you here for a little while longer. I know it may be uncomfortable, but it's going to be better for you when it's time to move. So now we're on the move for God. The cloud lifts up. Look at that commentary. Verse 11 marks a definite division in the book. Up to this point, the people had camped at Mount Sinai. From verse 11 to 22:1 is the record of the journey from Mount Sinai to the plains of Moab, just outside the Promised Land. This journey covered a period of almost 40 years. They did not start until the 20th day because of the celebration of the second Passover. So this journey that we're going now, this is the long 40 years, almost 40 years of going around in circles. Now, at this present point, when they leave Mount Sinai, literally, I believe God has all intentions of leading them to the Promised Land. They're just going to go about a week and they're going to get into the Promised Land. That's my thought. But we're going to find out because of their disobedience, it's going to start real quick. They're going to have to go around in circles over and over again. Someone read Numbers 10, 12, and 13, please. So God's cloud is leading them. The problem with the leadership, that's really not a problem, but is a problem for them, they don't know when God's going to stop. There's no map given to them. God doesn't say we're going to go, a few days or a few hours. They don't know. They're just following the cloud. When our kids were younger, they would have the thought pattern when we went on trips, how much longer? When are we going to get there? And I've noticed as I've gotten older, it used to be when I went on trips, I don't care if it was 8, 9 hours, we were going to drive until the gas ran out. That's just the way it was when I was younger. Now it's like, okay, we need to take about an hour, hour and a half, and get some water to go to the bathroom. But when they're following God, they don't know when God's going to stop. They don't know when God's going to take a break. So they have to be prepared for a lengthy journey, a short journey or a longer journey. God is leading them. Look at that. The first section of the journey was from Mount Sinai to the wilderness of Paran. However, there were 3 stops before they reached this wilderness: Taberah, Kibroth, Hadavad, and Hazarath. They actually reached the wilderness of Paran in Numbers 12:16. So we're following God. He's going to make some brief stops. They don't know where these stops are, but you're going to find out why he has to stop as we get a little deeper into this. Someone jump into Numbers 10:14. Now, as you look at that scripture, who leads? Why Judah? All right, the line of Jesus Christ also prays the first. Judah is always, that's where Jesus comes down through. Now, we're going to find out, we're going to go through this kind of quick, but there is going to be a line, a marching line. Everybody has their place. When I was in the military, when we marched, every time we marched, everybody had their place. When you're in school, if you came in a school where it was alphabetical order, for me, my place was always at the end of the line. I got used to it. As a little child, I learned very quickly. I think it was kindergarten, because I've got a W in my last name. I'm gonna be the last. I was never first. And so there were some times that they would switch it. They would go, okay, we're gonna go from the shortest to the tallest. And guess where I was at? It didn't matter. At the back of the line, at the back of the line. But God has an order, and it's by the tribes. The tribes are very important because they stand for something. Judah, that's the leadership one. Someone read this next part, Numbers 10:15 through 17. All right, as we look at that commentary, y'all doing great with those big words. Just make them up if you can't sound them out. Just kind of go, and people think you're using the Hebrew version. That's what it is. But if you stop, they know that you don't know the word. Just keep reading through that. The order in which the tribes march is given next. The leader of each tribe was where? At his head. Makes sense. Follow the leader. All right, anything come up, the leader is going to be out front. The order is the same as in chapter 2, with one exception. In 2:17, it seems that the Levites marched after Gad and before Ephraim. In 10:17, the Gershonites and the Merarites are listed after Zebulun and Kohathites after Gad. Apparently, the Gershonites and the Merarites moved on before or ahead with their equipment so they could have it all set up at the camping site when the Kohathites arrived with these sacred vessels. Remember, we learned this. So when you get to the place where God stops, the first thing that has to be set up is tabernacle, the camp. And you got to do it properly. You just can't throw it down. All those that are in charge of their pieces and parts, they have to go in the order. Because if you ever put a tent up, you got to make sure you get it in order. Amen. Anybody did a tent? I got a lot of stories. I bought this beautiful tent years ago. It was beautiful. I saved up my money for it. We were going to put it in the back, have a little gazebo going on. And my brother-in-law came over, and he tried to take the tent down, but he got out of order. And so he decided that because it wouldn't bend right, he was going to put a little pressure on it. And guess what happened? My tent broke. And you know what? I haven't spoke to him about that tent. I did. Every time I think about that tent, I go, ah. I just kind of let it go because he got out of order. And all he had to do was just follow the order. If he just waited and he would have did 2 before he did that other one, then everything would have went right. But he decided to jump to 5 before he did 2, and he broke my tent. And you know what? I tried to say the tent. I used duct tape, and I taped it up, but the tent was never the same. It was, never the same. Look at this next part. Just confess my faults to somebody. Numbers 10:18 through 21. Someone read, please. Now, this is key. I wanted you to focus on that 24th verse. When they arrived there, the next camp, before they got there, the tabernacle would already be what? Already set up. This is good because we make spiritual correlations from the Old Testament, knowing what God did. Everything that happens in our life, when we're in the will of God, when we get there, it's already set up. Our victory, literally, is already done in God's sight. That's why we have to trust him. We have to trust when we're in God's will, wherever we get, God has already worked it out. It doesn't matter how it looks. The tabernacle has been set up. Everything is in place. We have the victory because the victory is not in us anyway. It's in the Lord. So when they would get to that point, they're following God. The tabernacle is already. And what a glorious picture. The Kohathites, they go out, they get all their pieces together. The cloud stops. And they get there, and the tabernacle is in all its glory. And they set up camp, waiting for God to move again. This is their picture. This is their trick, over and over again. Someone read Numbers 10:22 through 27.
Their leader was Ahiezer, son of Ammishaddai. They were joined by the troops of the tribe of Asher, led by Pagiel, son of Ochran, and the troops of the tribe of Naphtali, led by Ahira, son of Elam.
Excellent. Now, I want you to see the picture because it helps you to get through all these long names. They're marching. They're marching. Minister Hampton, he may remember this in the military. There was a time that usually after you get through basic training, they have a parade for all those, and they march you around, and you get to look at your officers, and if your parents can get there, your family members can get there, it's beautiful. They dress you up, you look real nice, you get your best, everybody's right, left, right, whatever. Everything is marching, and everything is in line. What a beautiful day. This is the children of Israel as they're in line according to their families, according to what God called. It is, if the enemy's looking in on them, they're afraid. Because all the enemy sees is a cloud. And then they see all these people marching in line, in families. Everybody is ordered. And then when they get to the stopping point, tabernacle goes up, all the people come down, they put their tents around, and they wait. God is leading, cloud by day and a fire by night. Who would want to mess with the Israelites? I'm going to give you a secret. The only people that are going to mess with the Israelites are the Israelites. And that's the issue in our lives. It's not our enemies. I have to counsel people, and even in my life, we can blame other folks all day, right? If it hadn't been such and such, if such and such would leave me alone, if they'd be nicer for me. Our problem is not other folks. If you are a Christian, you got Jesus, it's not other folks. It's us. It's us, Jeff. That's all of us, right? We following God's direction, putting him first, it's our issue, our problem, and him ordering our steps. Look at that commentary. The march northward began just 11 days after the census was completed. So remember, we went through that census, we had that, we talked about the firstborn, all that's very important. So 11 days after the census occurs, they began to march. Israel had been camped at the base of the Mount Sinai for approximately how many? We went over this. How many months? 11 months. 11 months of teaching and training. 11 months and 5 days, but now it was time to go forward. It takes time. It takes time to learn. And if you could, impatient like I can be at times, sometimes we don't want to take that time to learn. We want to just get it now. And our society does that to us, especially now, because everything's so quick. Everything moves so fast. You know, our phones and our internet, all of these things. I used up a lot of my data a couple months ago, and they gave me this nice little thing. They said, you're overage now, you've overaged your data, but we're not going to charge you. We're just going to slow you down. It was like a gift. It was like they were saying, we're going to give you a gift. So I was like, well, cool. I went over, I got it, but you're still going to give me data. But what they were doing, they were cursing me. They were cursing me because I'm used to all these fast speeds, but when they slowed me down, it was like dial up. I was like, what's going on? You know, but some of you who remember when we first started up, you remember that was the sound you got when you were at home on your computer and you had a modem and you actually dialed up to get to the internet. And we were excited. You knew when you started dialing up your modem, you went and got you a sandwich and some drink, getting prepared. You would get prepared for the internet. It wasn't so quick. But now everything has to be now. God's teaching and training takes time. Yes, sir. And now you're going to go real slow. Someone read this next part, Numbers 10:28. All right, I want you to see the order. The picture of this order is very important because we're going to see it when we get into the promised land too. When we get and we march around Jericho, remember that? And the walls come down, order is going to be very, very important. Here's another, just a little gem. When you get out of the order that God has told you to be in, there's always going to be problems. It's key. relationships, families. It's this big issue now. Who's going to be the leadership of the home? God did that not to diminish anybody. He just said it's order. Judah wasn't any better than any other tribes, but God had a plan. So Judah's going to be first. That's the leadership. That's how it goes. And when we can't submit to what God has said, there's always trouble. Leadership. Look at little ducks. We see the swans and all of that when they have little kids. Do you notice something? Mom and daddy, they're leading. You know what them little ducks do? They're in order, and most times they're in order to age. How do I know that? It's a study because they're taller. And they go to, you see that, if ducks can do it. I'm sorry, that's a good message right there. According to 10, 11 through 36, the march consisted of 7 basic sections. Look at this, followed by the mixed multitude. These were, section 1, Moses, Aaron, and the ark. So Moses, hearing from God. Aaron, his spokesperson, he's the high priest, and the ark. They're all in that first part, that section. Love those 7, the completeness. Section 2, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun, verses 14 to 16. Section 3, Gershon and Moriah, verse 17. Section 4, Reuben, Simeon, and Gad, verses 18 through 20. Section 5, Korahites, the sons of Levi, verses 21. Section 6, Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin, verses 22, 24. And section 7, Dan, Asher, and Naphtali, verses 25 through 27. So 7 sections, kind of gave you insight, completeness. Numbers are important. You got your 3s. Usually Trinitarian, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. 5 is what? Come on, y'all. Grace, all right? Grace. When you see 5s, think about grace. Your 7s are completeness. Your 12s are completeness also. You think about your 12 apostles, 12 disciples. So when you see those numbers, and they can be multiple too. So you can have your 14s. Think about completeness too. God is showing us something by even how he marches his troops. Look at this next part, Numbers 10:29. Someone read. All right, let's get real and let's get ready. When God leads us, when we finally get to move, there's a danger. The danger is that now we kind of let up. We get free. In the blessings times when we're moving, sometimes we tend to go, ooh, this is cool, this is nice, and we let our guards down. And this is key and critical. Never, ever, ever let your guards down. It doesn't matter how good it is. Keep praying. Keep seeking the Lord. When you go to Disney World, keep your guards up. All right? Keep praying. On vacation, keep praying, because in those blessing times, it's so easy to kind of let those guards down. I'm going to show you. Hodab was Moses' brother-in-law. Raguel, same as Reuel and Jethro, was Hobab's father and therefore Moses' father-in-law. So he is a father-in-law. What is he asking? What is he saying to his father-in-law within that verse? Anybody? Join us. All right? All right, we're going to treat you well. We want you to roll with us. The issue, and we're going to deal with this, was he in God's will? Because there's some folks that you want to be with you, they ain't supposed to be with you. You ain't even supposed to ask them to be with you. There's some people that you don't need to hang out with. You don't need to be rolling with, because God said that's not for you. And then there's some people that's supposed to be with you, and sometimes we can get that confused. So I want you to kind of look at this closely as we examine, was Moses in God's will? And I believe that there are times in Moses' life it's been proven that he was out of God's will. We know one of them. What was one of them that we're definite that he was out of God's will? He killed the slave master. All right, he was definitely out of God's will, but it seemed right to him. Moses knew at that time that he was going to be the deliverer, and that he thought God was going to move in him by killing folks. How many times have we made that mistake? We thought it was the will of God, But that murder cost him 40 years on the backside of a mountain for God to get his heart right. So let's jump into Numbers 10:30. Someone read, please. We have a problem. Moses, the leader, hears from God, says, I want you to go with us. But the brother-in-law says, what? Gotta go home. So we're looking in on this. Who's right? And there's so many issues in our life are just like this. There's nothing inherently wrong in it, but there is a will of God. God's will is one way or the other. Either he's supposed to be with Moses or he's not. Notice within the brother-in-law, there's no hesitation. I need to go home. I need to be with my people. Let's look at how this falls out because we're going to have to examine what is the will of God. Numbers 10:31 and 32. Someone read, please. Dean Kelly. Okay. Okay. Right. So Deacon Keller brings out a point. And he said a lot in that, and we do. And I want you to feel this struggle, and I want you to look at Moses. The will of God is like this. It just came in my heart when he was talking. And it's true. It seems that in our lives sometimes we can't or we don't go, God, what is your will in this? So how can we make sure we're in God's will? It's kind of like when I used to go to the water park, and I would get on the slide, and it would go around and things of that sort. When I got on the top of that slide, I would look. And even though I couldn't see all the turns, I would look and see if anybody else flew off. That's my first thing. That's the first thing. When I'm climbing up, I'm looking, is there any bodies? Any bodies laying down there on the ground? All right? So I want to go this. I feel good about it. And so I start sliding. So at that point, I'm going down the slide. I'm turning, banking. I know at the end of that slide, I'm going to end up in that water, and it's going to be okay. And that's our whole prayer life and walking with the Lord. When we start off on the day, we've got to make sure that we're in his presence because it's going to be sliding. Our day is going to be sliding. We're going to be going through. But when we bank, I got to know I'm in the will of God. I got to know. I'm not going over the edge because he's got me that whole process. But so many times in people's life, if you haven't prepared, if you aren't seeking him and praying, you're just going off the slide. You're on the wrong slide. Some of y'all shouldn't have got on the slide. You ever see somebody do that? They usually sound like this. Ah! They should have never been on the slide. Never been on the slide. They were out of the will of God. And that's how some people live from day to day. Christians live from day to day, didn't pray, not prepared. We're going to turn. But it's all in making sure we're smack dab in the will of God. Deacon Mevin. Good, good. So you know you've swung enough to know what you should do, but if you think about it too much, so we got to make sure that we know God's will and we flow in it and we don't get ourselves in it. Cinda. Look at this scripture though. What is Moses doing in here? Here's insight, and I'm not, because we all have to decide as God ultimately, Moses is. He's on the Mount of Transfiguration. We got that. But I've found in my life, when you start begging folks, start adding stuff to it, be careful. I'm serious. Be careful. If you get ready to get married, people start begging you, please stay with me. They start trying to. You better slow down. Say, God, is this your will? Because when people start adding antics to it, that's the flesh. That's the emotions that are getting involved. And this is actually out of character, Moses. This Moses doesn't. Now we see a couple times this kind of comes up, but this is not generally his character. His character is generally with God. I'm only speaking what God wants me to speak. And of course, he'll get upset. We see that upset part of him, even in his humility. But this whole struggle, we see it on the other side. Please, I need you. We got to be careful in those situations. Yes, sir. And then we'll go through that. Correct. Good. Good point. But Chapman.
Yes, I'm reminded of the situation with Abraham. And Abraham decided to take Lot. Lot brought issues.
You're right. Whole bunch of issues. There's so many decisions in our life that seem right at the time. Any amens? I just want to make sure. Richard, free? All right, I just want to make sure. All right, but Jeff. Good. Maybe you're called to be alone. God will never leave you, but for this piece of the journey, you can only go. You can't depend on anybody else. It's got to be about you. And I believe our whole journey, God gives us people around us, loved ones, but ultimately our dependency has to be on the Lord. Someone read that commentary, Being a Midianite. What are your thoughts? We kind of talked about that. Just want to hear some more. Angela. It's good. Our weaknesses, God helps us, He strengthens us. But Paul makes a statement. He said, when I'm weak, then am I strong. That lets me know your weaknesses usually stay with you. All right? And I think God allows those weaknesses to stay so we can be dependent on Him. So never think that you're all that. I'm always reminded, I remember out there in that parking lot years and years ago, I was playing basketball. I think Deacon Kelly was around there, and I messed up my left ankle years ago. So much so that Sunday I had to preach on crutches. Y'all remember that? I mean, really, I was in pain. I was in pain for probably months. And it's been years since I did that. But every now and then, that same left ankle will ache me and remind me of my stupidity and our weaknesses. And that's what, bless God, and it does. When I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna go start playing basketball again, that ankle go, like, yeah, you're right, Lord. That was a dumb idea. God has to use our weaknesses just to remind us our dependency is not on ourselves, but all on Him. Deacon Kelly. Right. Amen. Now, I want you to put this instance, because we're still on the fence, put it in your pocket. All right, I want you to remember this. We know possibly this is Moses' weakness because we're going to deal with some other stuff, and I'm going to try to convince you and show you it's the same issue. The same issue that he has here, he will have later. It'll just be transposed in a different picture, but it's still the same thing that he's been battling with all his life. When he killed the Egyptian, it was a lack of faith. It was a lack of trust in God that he was going to work it out. He was trying to do it himself. We see this same thing coming up, this impulsiveness. We got to be careful. We got to slow it down. It doesn't matter how many victors we have. It's often comes to, oftentimes, have you ever noticed when you have a whole bunch of victories, we tend to get a little lax? Right? We get like, oh, I got this. And that's when we fall on our face and we're reminded. Sadrian. Amen. And that's what we deal with in our lives. Who's right? Mother Serrano, yesterday someone called me, had a counseling session. They said, the Lord told me to tell you, da 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 da. Like, okay. And they wouldn't let me talk or anything. It was like, the Lord said, I'm like, okay, all right. I'm trying to hear from the Lord too. And I said, you know what? Maybe the Lord wanted you to say this so I could tell you this. You need to start listening to other folks. I mean, because we all have an interpretation. And I'm just like, and early on in the ministry, you know, being young, people tell me, God said this. And I'm like, I'm trying to turn over backwards, do these. I'm like, I don't think the Lord said that. I don't think the Lord, or maybe you just misinterpret it because you tend to have a lot of words for other folks. Here's a word for you. God spoken to me right now to speak to you. And that's what we have to be careful. God can use us, but he can use other folks too. And we've got to be willing to listen on both sides. Look at this commentary. Another view is held by Kurtz, who suggests the pillar of cloud determined the general route to be taken, the place of encampment, and the length of tarry in each location. Yet human prudence was by no means precluded with respect to arranging the encampment so as to combine most advantageously the circumstances of water, pasture, shelter, supply of fuel. In all these particulars, Hobab's experience and knowledge of the desert would be exceedingly useful as supplementary to the guidance of the cloud. Do you agree or disagree? Why or why not? All right. But Jeff agrees, but should depend on the Lord. Well, it makes sense. It makes sense that his brother-in-law should come along. It does, but if you're outside of God's will, there's so much in our life just makes sense, but it's not the sensibility of God. His thoughts are not our thoughts. His ways are not our ways. Think how many times in our lives that we've done stuff that just made sense. You ever 90 days, same as cash? Doesn't that make sense? That makes sense. 90 days, same as cash, no interest. That makes sense until you don't pay it off in 90 days. It just makes sense. It just makes sense. You know what? 8 years, 6 years to pay for a car, that makes sense. Just take your time until the car starts falling apart, the 3.5 years, and now you're paying for it. You got that. Some things seem logical, but we don't see far off. And I think this is where Moses is. It's logical, but is it the will of God? Savannah. Amen. How many of us have done that? Argue with your GPS. God, I need you to show up. I need you to move. I got this bill due, and what? The card comes, a little envelope comes to your house, 22% interest, pre-approved $5,000, and we go, thank you, Jesus. You start singing slow, Lord, you made a way. But there seemed to be no. He's like, no, it's the devil. It seemed, and so now our dependency is on things and not actually hearing the voice of the Lord. And we do it over and over again. They say the college debt all-time high. Because that's what they have actually stopped looking for alternatives now. And like, oh, we can just get, loans and we'll pay it back. Yeah, parents will pay it back, right? Or you'll struggle and you'll get the job that you always wanted, and then the loan will show up and go, hey. So now you may as well have been working at McDonald's, not putting McDonald's down, but when you have to pay all that out, we see this whole process and struggle in our life. Yes, sir. Sometimes we depend on ourselves because we can't see afar off. One more hand, and I'm going to pull this together because we're out of town. Yes, ma'am. Amen. There are a lot of hands, but as we close out tonight, here's your homework again. 15 minutes, non-distracted prayer, all right? No smartwatches, no smartphones, no computer in front of you, just you and the Lord. No high-tech stuff. I don't want no pop-ups going on, no alarm clocks, anything like that. Just get you a place where you can focus 15 minutes, because all this is building up to, we got to discern. God's will can be so tight sometimes. And like this situation, you can go either way. And then as you're praying, I want you to start looking at some things, some decisions that are coming up. There's some decisions, I believe, that are coming up in your life that they're both ways. You weigh them out logically, and you're like, this way looks really good. But I'm telling you, you got to hear God's voice, because God is actually telling you another way. But it's a still small voice. God is not going to yell at you. He's not going to plead you. He's not going to plead with you, because his word is already there. And that's why it's so hard. The devil, boy, he advertises. Come on to your feet. Let's close out.